I have a favour to ask. If you have watched, liked anything that we produce and you haven't subscribed, please do, because Catty and I were just talking and we are committed to trying to do some new things, some big things, throwing guests, and the feedback and the momentum is fueled. So I think we've hit a bit of a stalemate. We have conversations that we like doing. However, we want to level up. And to do that, we need everyone's support. So if you've liked anything we've done, please subscribe. And in this week's Memes and Machines, I thought we had a good chat. We dive into algorithms. What are the secrets behind the platforms that we all want to garner attention on? We speak about ad formats. What are some of the trends that we're seeing? Why is B2B marketing flawed, boring, and stale? And have we as an industry been thinking about it all wrong? Agencies, why are they going to die and what will their role be in the future? They should only have one role and we explore what that should be. And finally, we dive into a world of abundance. In an AI age, we will have infinite choice. What does this mean for companies, startups, and marketeers? And Catty's a traitor. Croatia, what a traitor. It's coming home, lads.
Go on, Croatia.
Damn. Catman, good to see you as always. How you doing, brother?
Doing good. Just enjoying the Euros. Got my Croatia hat on.
Yeah, what a traitor. What are you doing with your Croatia hat?
I mean, I think I bought it when I was like 12. And so I just wear it every now and then when a Croatia play.
Damn. I went to the England game over the weekend. That was fun. It's a really interesting setup. They have the fan zone. So they'll have, we entered the Serbian fan zone on one day. Then we went to the England fan zone. And the best way I could describe the England fan zone was like walking into Creamfields, as you would imagine. It was good entertainment. But the boys did it. Not, they didn't light the house on fire, but they got the result. And it's coming home.
I'll see you at the final, mate.
I'll see you at the final. I did say you will go to the final. I think that's the one thing I would like really make an effort for now. Opening game, final.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm suddenly patriotic
Agreed.
again. Good stuff, my man. I want to get your take to kick this off on something we very occasionally cover, but it's always relevant: algorithms. Jack Dorsey he did a keynote in the last couple of weeks, and it picked up a lot of traction online. And his overall take was algorithms are creating echo chambers that ruin society and create groupthink and are accelerating all the challenges we have in society. And the only way to break away from this powerful force is to have verified, trusted third parties giving people choices for their own algorithm. You get to choose, etc., etc. And in one part, this is, I suppose, it was advocacy for Web3 and this take control back of the internet and remove the middleman narrative in part there. And then the second part is, I think for marketeers, we probably should be making all our decisions through the lens of how do we optimally ride an algorithm through our messaging, the things we create, our content, and so on. So I want to get Catman's deep dive into algorithms and give me a point of view on probably, I'd say, 3 channels that you are very proficient in and understand. 1 being Instagram, 2 being X, and 3 LinkedIn. And I'll weigh in on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they're becoming more and more important. And, social media has had this pretty big shift over the last 2 or 3 years where we've gone from, a following-based feed to now a discovery-based feed, which is driven largely by TikTok. And so more and more the algorithms are dictating the kind of content we consume. And, it used to be I follow someone, I get delivered their content. Now the platforms have a deep understanding of who I am, my demographic, my interests, my passions, and Instead, they're going to go out and find the content that they think I want to consume. And so that's just a fundamentally different way of thinking about social media. And now the algorithms are doing more work than ever to deliver the content to people. And so, yeah, it's way more important than ever to understand how they work. And obviously they change constantly, but the key thing I've observed is that these really deep engagement metrics are meaning more than ever. When I say deep engagement metric, I'm talking about things like conversation and probably the more hidden stuff as well, like shares. So Instagram revealed this recently. So the head of products at Instagram talked about how shares per reach is one of the most important factors when it comes to deciding which content gets priority. And when that happens on one platform, you can pretty much guess that it's probably consistent across other platforms as well. And this kind of falls in line with something I've recognized when I've been creating content on Instagram for probably 6-7 years now, and my content has evolved where I have this very kind of consistent format now, and I kind of took a look at the content I create, and I'd say that the common thread that I've recognized is that there are now more potential touch points for somebody to want to share that piece of content per piece of content than ever before. Right. So like the content I'll give you an example. The content that performs really highly for me is a starter pack. So it might be, I posted yesterday that was very on the most basic level, how do guys dress during summer starter pack. And the reason this performs so well is that it's just a very simple white frame with like 6 or 7 products with some kind of humor attached to them, that these are products that are trending this summer. And that's 6 or 7 opportunities for someone to see that piece of content, recognize that their friend wears it, and send that meme to them. And when you increase the number of products you have on a post, it's increasing the number of potential chances someone is going to share it. Now that's really scientific. Obviously, like it's probably, overthinking it a little bit, but I do think it's a good proxy for how content is starting to be created, where if you increase the number of potential share moments, you're going to reach more people. And the same could be said for how I post on Instagram. So I'll only post carousels now, where you post 6 or 7 posts in one. Again, it's 6 or 7 opportunities for somebody to share with someone.
Yeah,
and
I think building on that, there's a point that you're making that's really prevalent, is you're looking under the hood for intention. What is the goal of the platform? The goal is to keep users retained. To keep people retained, you need to curate and serve and create content that people love, like. What are the strongest signals, both overt and subliminal, that someone likes something? It's sending it in a DM. It's spending the time writing a long post. It's going as far as a share on the basis that it's speaking about your identity. Why would someone share? They generally only share because they either love something or it says something about their identity. And like what you're describing there in those packs is like everybody can see themselves in one of those 6 surface areas that you're describing, or they have a friend. And if it's anchored to humor and it's funny, like the whole point of that is like you're absolutely accelerating that distribution and the virality and the social graphs that underpin social networks. I do have a second question just before I want to interrogate that a bit further. On your starter pack, am I getting Zara Boy? Is like, what starter pack are you giving me? Like, be honest, I'm not going to take offense.
Yeah, you're getting senior business executive who is clinging on to the final days of his youth starter pack.
Wow. Wow. You know what? I think I'm like a fine wine. I generally think I'm getting more fashionable. However, you're probably right.
That's going to be a good idea for me, actually. I have to make that one up.
Well, you better. Well, I'll share that one. If you make through the lens of all, or like ad folk who are like trying to cling on to some relevance. Yeah, there you go. That one's for free. So give me a build on that then. Like, what is the distinction? Because to your point, like these things change all the time. If you were to say to a marketeer or a startup, what's like the mental model to continually understand these platforms? And like, what tips do you have for people?
Yeah, I think another shift I think is interesting to explore is, I remember maybe 5-10 years ago when Facebook was going through its kind of viral content moment. It felt like the content that really succeeded was that where somebody would spend the shortest amount of time possible on that piece of content, but engage with it the quickest and share it the quickest. So you'd have, 3-second memes that would go crazy viral. You'd have these very kind of short, quick content hits. One static meme that was super viral, super shareable. I think now platforms have realized that kind of encourages behavior where people are just kind of flicking through very quickly. And ultimately, it's harder to sell advertising space when you have that. And I now think the shift has been, whilst the first few seconds of, somebody dwelling on a piece of content is still as important as ever because you need to capture that, they're wanting people to spend more and more time on pieces of content. And you see that with Twitter, where Twitter removed their character limit. You can now put a full essay on Twitter. They removed their video limit. You can now put a 2-hour YouTube video on Twitter. They're seeing that there's actually a lot of value in people spending longer periods of time on certain platforms. And I won't be surprised if that continues. And so I think more and more, long form is going to continue to become interesting. I've seen a lot of pages get really experimental with captions as well on Instagram, where they're using it as, again, another piece of surface area where people are going to dwell a bit longer and spend time on that piece of content. So it's this like delicate balance between understanding that everybody has a short attention span and you're competing with thousands of pieces of content every single hour. So you need to capture people immediately and you have that viral mechanic. But at the same time, is there depth in your content? Is there a reason for somebody to stick around for 2 to 3 minutes? Because I think if you can capture somebody's attention for 2 minutes on an Instagram post, on a tweet, on a LinkedIn post, that's where the algorithm recognizes that behavior and then, can feed it to millions.
Yeah, and universally, I think there's a homogenization of social where they're all aggregating to appreciate and value and prioritize all the same things. What you're describing there is the ad inventory evolving, the priorities of the platforms looking for new opportunities to serve you ads. So it makes sense that their inventory is you. One thing I love when you describe that is you talk about surface area. And I think that's probably the most important distinction that marketeers have to reframe how they think about social media marketing. I talk about it in the exact same way as an ecosystem. And my view is you look at social media as an ecosystem whereby every touch point is an opportunity, whether that's a comment on your channel, whether that's a comment on someone else's, whether that's a DM, whether that's like a reel, whether that's an ephemeral story, whether that's a piece of content, whether that's written form. All of these places are real estate, but I actually prefer your definition of surface areas. And it's like, as a good strategy, how do we create maximum surface areas on the things we create? Because our opportunity to share, deliver results, and be effective increases exponentially based on that. So it's like you may post one thing, but fundamentally you're getting so much value through thinking through the lens of its surface area. I thought that was a really interesting take. I'm seeing it a bit on ad formats as well. Like I share internally, if I see something interesting as an ad format, I'll usually screen grab it and share it with the team and just give a very headline view on why I liked it. I think that's so important in organizations to create a culture where you're giving purpose. The only way you can understand algorithms is if you talk about them. So you do the same thing as me. We see something that's performed well and we go, why? And every good social marketeer does that. They go, well, why did that work? Well, it worked because it was an in-joke, it was a hook, it was attached to a bigger story, it was the right time, it was the right format. And they're usually really simple, and that's what makes it fascinating and fun. So when we break down ad formats internally, I'm seeing a lot more of like native social behaviors. So I saw one for a jewelry brand, I think it was Crafted. And Crafted served jewelry for men. And the ad I really loved was they just had a green screen format where a creator was basically saying, these are the top 3 looks that I absolutely love. And there was a couple of nuances why I thought it was particularly smart. One, doesn't disrupt feed, removes all friction. Two, it was all about the brand and products. It was all about like buying stuff. They didn't try and be too cute. It was just like, this is what it is. And three, the hook and the person green screening wasn't a man endorsing male jewelry. It was an attractive woman. So they kind of used that pull, again, that stop and feed, listen, validation from an attractive person. And like, there was so much subtlety to what was probably just an ad that they A/B tested in a big batch and realized that it worked well. And I'm seeing this more and more in performance marketing, in brand marketing. And I do think a lot about like the skills of marketeers, the people that are very critical thinkers and try and add meaning and intention to their work. They seem to be the ones that do the best work because they can continually show up in interesting and new ways.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's funny, like every single 6 months, 12 months, you can have a different conversation about algorithms, right? But it probably usually comes around to the same conclusion, which is, create content which is good inherently that people would share without your brand attached, and don't chase short-term kind of vanity wins. Right, like that's the stuff that's always going to succeed.
Yeah, I agree. It's like what we talked about, the Nicole the intern example, where it's like loose, there's a plot that is developing off the back of a storyline that's like an online in-joke, and it's very symbolic. The brand is almost redundant, but the effectiveness of that and getting people invested to care about a brand and the people behind it, I do think it's fascinating. I want to sidetrack and segue a little and talk about something we're both heavily involved in, whether it's self-promotion for our own companies or whether it's just a big category that I think is underrepresented. I want to talk about B2B marketing. So I'm not going to pull any punches. B2B marketing is boring, stale, uninventive and flawed in many respects. And this is not new. This has been B2B marketing for a long time. I hate the term. I think language matters. And calling it B2B marketing is almost doing it a disservice. You are always marketing to a person. So B2B, I don't even like the language. And although we know this, I try and think why. Why is the industry so antiquated? And there was a very interesting LinkedIn post that I read from Rory Sutherland. And I'm just going to read a few segments of it. It was quite a long post, but I think it spoke to a broader point that was fascinating. And it said, the interesting thing about fame is that it isn't linear. And in fact, you might argue that fame goes through various phase transitions. And then he goes on to start to talk about the fame where I've heard of something. So that's kind of stage one, awareness. Then you go through, there's a level of fame where others have heard about that thing. Not just you, but people you admire. And that's where luxury brands sit. When I buy a luxury brand, yes, in part it's about me, but equally it's probably more about someone else recognizing that that's cool and interesting and that brand has fame. And when you think about B2B marketing, everything that is done is very narrow. It's all about being specific to those targeted decision makers, and it's very stale and systematic, and that's the whole model in which the industry is built upon. However, if you just extrapolate from this idea around fame, in B2B buying, there are many stakeholders, there are bigger risks, bigger ticket items, and if you understand that context, the only logical conclusion is that fame matters more than anything. There's a saying, you never got fired for hiring IBM, because IBM is a brand that represents trust. It's the same reason why every brand complains about incumbent Big Four agencies, but continues to hire them because they are a brand and they represent safety, security, etc., etc. So this idea where we're trying to be very specific in B2B marketing and we only target these decision makers, it's ultimately flawed because it's more consequential to have fame in those environments than any other. So my only conclusion after reading some of the points from Rory is we've been thinking about B2B marketing all wrong. Give me your take, Catman. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is Rory onto something here?
Yeah, I'm tempted to say that I don't know if there is this distinction anymore. I don't know if B2B marketing really exists, in that the real winners, I think, if you think about the recent winners of B2B, so when you talk about IBM, they're kind of playing a different game, right? They have hundreds of years of brand building behind them. Like you said, there's a prestige. I think the modern winners of B2B today are probably doing... There's not much difference between the way that the biggest B2C winners are also winning.
Yeah.
In that, I think there's a bigger leaning towards personal brand is one thing, but ultimately it's all content. And the biggest B2B winners, so like those that have disrupted the agency landscape, you think about Gary Vee, of course, even Stephen with Social Chain, it really came from a heavy emphasis on personal branding and telling a great story over and over again and using social channels to distribute that message. And I remember when I was, coming up through marketing and as somebody who had never really trained in marketing, no experience, people kept talking about B2B and B2C. I never really understood the distinction of why you need to have such different mental models to think about it. And I think now more than ever, we're really seeing that, where the biggest winners I'm seeing on B2B, particularly on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn, they're all just telling great stories. And that's cutting through because they're competing with brands who are attempting to reach people through, a very boring consultancy page with a dull logo that nobody's going to click on. And so I agree. I think with Rory, he just probably said it in fewer words than I would have.
Yeah, and you're right in the sense that whether it's intentional, the brands that are winning fundamentally behave like that. The thing he's describing, they understand that fame and attention drives more results than, particularly in a world geared by algorithms, the middleman is dead. Being in the middle, indifference is where you die. I have this theory. You're better just not marketing at all. If you're not going to at least stand for something, fight against something, or win, what's the point? And I think as a brand, you can try for a period of time and you can reiterate your way till you get good. But if you never get good, just stop and do other things. That's the truth. Just stop and do other things. Very interesting. We were speaking to Lush. And Lush were one of the first major brands to come out and say they are no longer participating in social media. And they created an anti-social media policy. And it wasn't off the basis of yes, in part it's like an anarchist movement, but it was more to do with their ethics and their values, meaning that in the world we are more disconnected than ever. And the policies around data and privacy, they're actually almost ironically embodying Web3 values when they set this anti-social media policy. And when you think about how Lush show up in the world, my view is if you don't own channels and you don't have real estate, you can still win in social, but you just have to do it through the lens of others and not creators and not paid ads. But it's create products that people love and talk about and share. And they did when Salt Bay, was it Salt Bay? Not Salt Bay. What was the film? Saltburn. When that came out, they created a Saltburn bath bomb within a week of all the hysteria. And that gained them so much earned attention. And people just rushed out to buy it and posted and shared, and they created a moment. And that's a prime example of surface area. People, products, surface area. And it's a really interesting challenge to think about marketing in that kind of way. And, you know, I think Lush are just a really good example where brands can be inventive, but they choose either for moral, ethical reasons to take a path that others don't. But my biggest bugbear is like just brands doing mediocre stuff and like posting and not saying anything interesting. It's like, why try?
Yep.
Go hire salespeople. Like, you know.
Well, I think that's what social media did, and I saw this a lot in, you know, building social strategies for brands. Is that you'd suddenly find yourself having this like very busy content calendar to adhere to, and it means that your creative team is like on this conveyor belt, and it can't slow down. Like you have to deliver. Oh, we've got like a National Avocado Day next week. We've got to make that post, and then we got to, and all this stuff was just, you know, filling the air. It was just noise. And what I like about Lush's strategy is it actually forces them to slow down and take bigger swings on activations that are actually going to cut through, like anti-algorithm is like I call it. It's not, and something that we are doing at the moment at Third Web is we definitely went through a period where our content was just not performing as well as it used to. So we've suddenly had a bit of a stale moment. And I think that happens because you start to get a bit of a pattern. You start to know which content does well, but you almost get a little bit complacent. And because we have partners that we work with, and so next thing you know, you're having to like create content. And I took a step back and I was like, this isn't really hitting, and we're just doing it because of inertia. We're doing it because we're doing it. And so we stopped everything. And in July, we're launching this big campaign, right? Because I realized like we just need to take bigger swings here. And I'd rather that failed, right? But at least we tried something because it could get 10x the engagement, 10x the impressions. And I think that's what a lot of brands need to do is just slow down for a sec and think, what is a bigger swing we can take here that's actually going to be, what I call anti-algorithm. It's going to cut through and people are going to share it regardless of whether it gets delivered to them.
I love that. It's classic opportunity cost. For that 10% of time you spend just doing the thing because you're supposed to do the thing, means you take away from that opportunity, that bigger swing, that moonshot. We all fall into that dangerous trap, complacency. It was funny, I was having a conversation earlier with a friend, and we spoke about like my favorite iconic moment from, when you read those emails that are like leaked emails coming through from senior tech execs. There was one from Steve Jobs, and they just achieved number one dominance in market after 20 years. They overtook Microsoft in valuation. And Steve Jobs wrote a very simple email and just said, you know what, we're here because of the people. We've done this. However, we move. Let's not get complacent. We move. Like, just imagine that 20 years to become and build one of the most dominant, incredible companies humanity's ever seen. And you just drop an email, go, back on the horse.
Yeah.
I like, what a savage, first and foremost, but secondly, I deeply respect it. And I think as marketeers, we consistently have to reinvent ourselves and remind ourselves of those moments of like complacency. Stop doing talking heads. Like, we had a bit of a debate about the podcast just before we clicked live around like, cool, like what we're doing. I enjoy these conversations, you do, we get content, but are there things we can do if we actually want this, for more people to have the opportunity to, get value from something we create? We probably should think differently, not just fall in these same habits. I think it's such an important lesson to all marketeers.
Agreed.
Another thing that I wrote down this week, and it was just, I'm like going through my mental task list to figure out why I wrote this down, but I think I know why. I read a post from actually an ex-client of ours. She's a phenomenal marketeer, and she was describing how people described her. And she wrote, "You've always been an outsider looking in, and that's your superpower." And as a marketeer, she believed that's what made her effective within a large sporting organization. And it made me think a lot. And I instantly, my mind went straight to ad agencies, because I'm thinking about this a lot, like, what ad agencies going to do when technology does more and more of the work that we're currently doing? And I just thought, that is exactly the only reason ad agencies should exist. is like being an outsider, not having the curse of knowledge, not knowing too much, having perspectives that are very hard to gain when you're too close to source. And I just thought it's probably the only reason that ad companies should exist in the future. What's your take on not knowing too much and this general kind of being an outsider? And I imagine it was like advantageous to you being an outsider from tech when you started at like Third Web.
Yeah, it's like another nice quote is it says the same thing as like you can't read the label from inside the bottle, right? Where it's like,
that's cool.
I think crypto has a lot of this, and Web3 has a lot of this, where naturally, if you're working in Web3, you're very taken by the technology. You're a daily practitioner. You're very invested, and as a result, you speak a different language to the rest of the world. Like you fundamentally see the world differently because you understand the nuts and bolts and the mechanics that are going on behind the scenes, and that means you aren't very good at explaining it to, a large number of people, like the masses. And I see it all the time where I'll see messaging from a Web3 or crypto company, and I just, I kind of want to say, like, have you guys really read this? Like, what do you, like, this just is complete jargon to anybody who, isn't super invested. And so I think that's why agencies and even like external parties, even like within the industry, are important, because they do just have this outside perspective. And, we operate in bubbles now, both in like social media, right? Like my Twitter feed is a complete bubble and distorts the way that I think the world, consumes events and understands news and things. But even within our companies, right, our Slack groups are bubbles. Like, it's very easy to be in a Slack with a group of people who understand your company's mission, and therefore you completely forget that the rest of the world doesn't give a fuck. And so when you say something internally and 10 people react on an emoji and say, oh my God, that's amazing, and then, when you say it to the world and nobody gives a fuck, it's suddenly a sobering reminder that, you're too close to the thing you're building. And often you need somebody who's a complete third party to say, that doesn't make sense, or talk about it in this way, and it will resonate with more people.
Yeah, it's naivety. It's naivety being a strength. We have all these terms that feel like they're negative. They're loaded words. They have certain negative connotations, but the reality is, when applied in the right setting, it's a huge advantage. And I think, how do you, if you extrapolate on that, then how do you think you use that naivety to an advantage as a marketeer? Like, how do you stay naive? I could tell you a lot about like fashion marketing. What are some things you can do it's almost like, how do you pursue being a beginner again? There was a phrase, actually, it's funny, I'm saying it out loud, but there was a phrase I used to love, and it was called being hungry-eyed. And it's this idea of like taking yourself back to that moment when you didn't know anything, or where you started something, and like, if you can keep grabbing hold of that, and it disappears, it's fleeting, but if you can be hungry-eyed, it's like, it feels like it can give you advantages if you can keep taking yourself back to that place.
I think it's important, like, to use people, right? So like, sometimes you can't, there's nothing you can physically do to stay new about something, right? Like, in a lot of times, like, I can't unlearn things. So like, those are mental models that I have that I can't really remove. But what I do have are friends and people within the, friends in the industry, friends outside the industry, that I can send stuff to and be like, does this make sense to you? Or people in the company. I think one thing that people need to get better at is not working in silo, right? And then using, what's great about a tech company is that you have people in business, but you have people in the engineering team, you have people with very different understandings of the technology you're building, and getting everybody to, look at something and give you feedback, I think is one important way. I think something else is also just to become a beginner and in other places, right? Because then you start to recognize patterns. Like, I've always been someone who has kept the fashion industry at this kind of like arm's length, where it's an industry I'm interested in, I'm passionate about it outside of my 9 to 5. But I regularly work with some of the biggest fashion brands in the world. And what I think that gives me is this kind of really unique outsider's perspective. And I see how I see fashion differently, because I'm not somebody who is in the press rooms and I'm thinking about it 100% of the day. So I think it allows me to approach the industry a little differently and maybe offer a new perspective. And then I can kind of, I can apply that to how I think about, selling technology.
Well, that's a bloody leap, lad. That's a leap. It's funny. It's interesting. One of our potential new clients coming on, their background was elite military, SAS, Special Forces. And they've built this amazing brand. They've got quite a high profile in the UK. And they do everything right. They've got this like real commitment to excellence. If you look at their product, their website, just everything's just done with class and elegance. And it speaks about, a team of people that have this like thorough, resilient, disciplined mindset. It comes through in their clothing. And it was interesting hearing their story about like, how do you go from elite special forces to I'm going to do fashion? And they were saying it was like, well, I'm up in the mountains and everything's about functional, but they wanted to look good. And it's like how it made them feel when they were on missions and doing training exercises. And it was always like, they always had this deep-rooted passion to be creative. And I love that. You go, well, that's how you achieve success. You've got this inherently contradictory kind of world and this maybe unique perspective that others don't have. So it means when you're creating fashion, and I say fashion as a proxy for anything really, but you show up in the world in a new, inventive, original way. It's like really interesting, these like unusual pairings. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot when people ask me around AI. Use a case for AI, and I could give you many specific ones. One of them I love is, as people, we live in our own heads. We all live in our own heads. We're the heroes of our own story, and it means that we think anyone gives a fuck about us, and they don't. No one cares about you as much as you care about you. It's the reason that we put significance and we feel pressure around things that don't even matter, because we are the heroes of our own story. One of the things about AI is we now have infinite perspectives. I can ask an AI to be anything I want it to be. And actually, that's a really interesting way to view AI as a creative sparring partner to help you eliminate bad ideas, to help you view something from the perspective of a underrepresented group, or, to be very specific of how you would view this from this vantage point. And I just think if you think about AI as a tool to augment and bring out the best in you as an individual, it reframes your kind of relationship with the technology. And this perspective thing is something I'm thinking about a lot. It's like, how do I practically use technology now to give me more perspective?
Yeah, exactly.
On that point, a big topic in AI is creating, not AI, but technology more broadly is creating a world of abundance. Like, we have way too many choices. We are burdened with choice. There's an interesting take I read on LinkedIn, and it said more people now die from obesity than malnutrition. It's the truth, right? We have too much. As a marketeer, and you touched on it before a little bit around like being intentional, bigger moments, less thoughtful, etc., etc. How do you navigate like too many choices? And as someone that is in a technology business that's consistently introducing new things, how do you stay disciplined to like your core mission? Because I think it's very hard to do, because you're experimenting, you're creating all the time. How do you stay disciplined in a world of abundance, and how do you navigate that challenge?
Yeah, it's tricky because we're building a product in an industry which is very new, and so in order for us to win, we've identified that the best strategy is to ship a lot of product. So like constantly come up with new features, constantly ship a lot. And that gives us the highest number of shots at goal, which gives us the best chance of success, because nobody really quite knows where the direction this industry is going. It's evolving so quickly. And so being able to keep up with that is actually the biggest competitive advantage we can have. And that's very different to other businesses. So if you think like an example of Craigslist, which I think is a brilliant business, because it basically has one product that hasn't changed in 20, 30 years, and they don't need to ship features. They just need to focus on doing what they do very well. And there's a few businesses, a lot of businesses like that. We're very different in that respect. And so actually shipping a lot of product is one of our core values. And so being consistent to that. So like people recognize ThirdWeb as being a team that ships a lot. And actually that in itself is something we focus on. And that means that is a very, that's one of our like storytelling pillars. But at the same time, we have certain features and certain products that are already used by tens of thousands of people. And it's really important that we don't forget that. And we don't forget to remind people that is what we offer to the world. And so honestly, a lot of it is just using data to figure out where our attention should be spent and understanding like what are the most sticky parts of our product. And if there is something that's gaining a lot of traction, we need to double down in that direction. And if there's something that nobody uses anymore that's effectively dead, it needs a bit less of our attention. And then I think outside all of this, just like remembering to tell the story of the company is important. And that really sits outside of the products we ship. We like to think of every single announcement we have or every single big moment is like a chapter in our story. And we still want to tell people that story. And that kind of exists regardless of, the abundance of products that we have.
Yeah. I think it's a really good take. And probably one of the things I've observed from you guys is your willingness to not only evolve and change and test new things, but I think you're very disciplined around cutting things that aren't working. If you're not getting your ROI focused, but your execution is inherently creative. Everything is like we put creativity at the center of what we do, but we're also very diligent in recognizing, measuring efficacy and ensuring that we're just not wasting energy. I think that's so important to the startup, right? Non-wasted energy. I remember starting Flight Story and we'd hired a 4-person marketing team at the time, and they're wanting to do fun stuff. And it's like, as a new company, that did B2B, like we are a B2B business, like we have one territory that we needed to try and dominate on, and that was LinkedIn. So the lens was, we only do LinkedIn. And it was like, no, but we want to do this cool thing. We want to launch this podcast. We want to do it. It's like, no, we do LinkedIn in big moments, focus. And then over time, once you get to the phase of where you've earned your stripes and something's working and you can do it efficiently, then you move on to like that next thing. There was a part of me was thinking a bit about like, we tend to have universal truths for marketing where we bucket what enterprise large organizations do and startups do together. Fundamentally, they're different things. I believe at a really basic level, if you are a big global brand or you're an enterprise company of a certain size, 85% of what you do should be tried, tested, playbooked, understood. And 15% of what you do should be room for play, experiments, testing, finding your new unlocks. Conversely, if you're a startup, it has to be the other way around, right? You have every disadvantage. The only advantage you have is the ability to do more with less stakes, right? So less things at stake. So I think it's like 85% figuring shit out and then 15% of like layering that up. And as a company evolves, you evolve with it, right? That balance when you're going through those growth phases. And that was like a simple framework that I kind of rationalized in my own mind.
Yeah, agreed.
On that note, my man, I think we should call it a day. But always a pleasure, dude. It is coming home, you absolute traitor with the Croatia hat.
You don't have a second team.
Why Croatia? Have you got them in the sweepstakes or something?
I used to go to Croatia a lot as a kid. I think it's my favourite country in Europe. So I have a soft spot.
Okay, that's
what's your heritage again? English and
Bulgarian. So Eastern
Bulgarian.
Bloc.
They're not. Okay, they're not in it this year though.
No. I always find that interesting. When someone's like Dom is like grew up in England his whole life, but he'd favour Scotland over England.
Yeah, I say this a lot, and I see this in a lot of Americans, and Dom's a great example. But the most patriotic people you'll ever meet are the people with a fraction of that country's heritage in them. When it's their mum's great aunt is Colombian, they're the most Colombian person you'll ever meet in your life.
Yeah.
And they'll...
Dom's talking about his clan. He'll be talking about his clan in England.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, you've lived in England your entire life. You're English. Contrarian thought. Cool. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.